We first have an update discussion, which is our 14th update on the COVID-19 school reopening plan. So again, we've been doing these at every board meeting. With the updates, things do progress rapidly and clearly change. We've had board meetings every other week, and it seems like every other week we've got lots of stuff to update. So take it away.
We good? As Shelley mentioned, this is our 14th schools reopening update, and we have with us tonight Matt Catanzari, Principal of Whitehill, Donna Faulkner, Principal of Wade Thomas, Peg Minicozy, Principal at Manor, Eric Sable, Director of Student Services, Julia Wolcott, Director of CNI, and myself as Superintendent.
All right.
And one of the reasons that we looked at providing this slide tonight is just a quote from Dr. Santora, who was with the Deputy Health Officer with Marin Health and Human Services. And it just shows that, that the data has shown the schools are not a driver of community transmission, but rather provide safe, stable, structured, supervised, and supportive environments that reduce risk behaviors associated with COVID-19 transmission, such as household mixing, for childcare and unsupervised gatherings or for socialization. And so what we're learning more and more is that schools are safe places when all of our health and safety practices are in place and are active. And what we also know is that there's been some research that Marin Health and Human Services has gathered. So we borrowed their slide that they have utilized in some of their presentations, where they have shown that there is little evidence that schools have contributed very much to the transmission of COVID-19. So in the fall of 2020, there were 11 schools in North Carolina that were in person for 9 weeks. And of those, the school transmissions were very rare, with only 32 infections acquired in schools, but yet there were 773 community acquired infections. And there were no cases of student to staff transmission. And then another data point is related to the 17 K-12 schools in Wood County, Wisconsin, in which there were 191 cases with students and staff, but only 7 of those were determined to be a result of in-school transmission. And then the European Center for Disease Prevention and Control has issued a report that schools were not associated with accelerating community transmission. It's not to say that there isn't any at all in schools, but that schools are not a main source of transmission of COVID-19. And then again, that's with and when we put our health and safety practices in place and we follow them. And in Ross Valley, what we have done is we've created our own dashboard where we are tracking some data related to what happens in our schools, school-related in-person instruction between students and staff with COVID-19. And then we also want to celebrate Marin County as a whole. So Marin County Schools tracks all public, private, independent, parochial schools in the county, and they put together a much more complex and more informative dashboard than we have. But it is interesting to note here that we've almost reached, and by then, this data is as of last Friday, February 5th. So by now, we probably, with all of the schools in Marin County, have exceeded 1 million number of in-person student days. And of those, there are about approximately 55% of students in Marin County are in person. And according to the figures that are maintained, there have only been 10 suspected in-school transmissions of COVID-19 since September 5th. And that's, September 8th, which is when some of the schools in Marin County did open to in-person instruction as early as September 5th or 8th. And of those, 5 were student to student, 3 were adult to adult, and 2 were adult to student. But there have been 0 student to adult transmissions in any schools in Marin County. And then on our dashboard, as I mentioned, what we are looking at is a snapshot just part of our dashboard. So it sits on our district website on our COVID-19 page, and it's updated whenever the information comes in and it needs to be updated related to tracking scenarios 2 and 3. Scenario 2 is a close contact of students and staff with a family member or someone who tests positive for COVID-19. And scenario 3 is if a student or staff member tests positive. And just as a reminder, we're only tracking students and staff members who work on our campuses, on our work sites, not any students who are in virtual learning academy or any staff who work remotely. And of all of this data here, we have only one suspected in-school transmission, and that was not involving an adult. And so what we have is that our, amongst all of our schools, and so just as a reminder, this is located on our dashboard, but with all of our SDC classes, they're located, so we have early childhood, TK through 5th grade, and then our 6th through 8th grade. They're all housed on the 2 of our campuses district-wide is Brookside and White Hill. And they were first to reopen back in October, and then we began our hybrid models at middle school at the end of October and at elementary beginning in November. So within that period of time, going back all the way to October, which is when we started tracking, is these are our school-related, in-person related numbers for scenarios 2 and 3. Let's see, any questions so far on this slide? No? Okay, thank you. And in our schools reopening planning, which is what the majority of tonight's presentation is all about, is that we have been utilizing county and state guidelines. Marin County's guidelines for schools were updated as recently as December 8th, and the California Department of Public Health's guidelines were updated on January 14th, and both are very much in alignment with each other and provide guidance to support in-person instruction to the fullest extent possible. As we know that sometimes the guidelines change, as they have with both the county and the state guidelines for schools, and once they do change, when they change, we adapt and we make changes to our school site safety plans as well as to any other planning and protocols that we need to have in place. Some of the elements that are most critical to the work that we're doing related to having students and staff on campus safely is, of course, face coverings for all students and staff, hand hygiene, cleaning, disinfecting protocols, and distancing. Both the county and the state guidelines are very much in alignment related to, they're the same, related to distancing between teacher and other staff desks must be at least 6 feet away from student and other staff desks. And then the distancing between students can be 6 feet, but under no circumstances should the distance between student desks or chairs be less than 4 feet. And then in the event that 6 feet of distancing is not possible, it's recommended to optimize air ventilation inside of the classrooms and office spaces, as well as to consider using other separation techniques such as partitions or arranging desks in a way that minimize face-to-face contact. And another critical element, which is shifting a little bit from where we were at the very beginning of in-person instruction, is, well, this part hasn't changed. The contact tracing and the knowing which students and staff are coming into contact with each other, where students and staff are on campus, supports that contact tracing, which is really critical to being able to identify the close contacts of COVID positive students and or staff members. And so maintaining really good records and being able to provide that information to county health if we do have a suspected or a reported close contact or a reported positive case. That way we know exactly where that, which students may have been involved, which staff members may have been involved, and can move forward around that. And so with all of these really critical components to our in-person instruction and making sure we have these in place, that just goes along with the evidence that we have seen so far, and knowing that schools have very little evidence that schools have contributed to the community spread of COVID-19. And so schools showing are a really safe place to be. And so we're continuing in that vein of our reopening or phased reopening.
All right. And so this week's presentation of our phased return, we've kind of set it up a little bit differently, but you've seen a similar slide in the past of the different phases that we're going through. And on this one, we're starting here at phase 3, and this is where we are right now. You can see when each of these different grade level bands began in-person instruction in the hybrid model, and understanding that our latest comers to this model are the seventh and eighth grade students who are in the 3x3 model of instruction, and that started on January 19th. And then we have announced to our parent community, and we are very, very excited that beginning February 22nd, we'll be finally entering phase 3.1. And in this phase, we are extending in-person instruction for a full hour for our TK through 6th grades. And so that's really the significant difference there. And of course, it increases our weekly hours of in-person instruction at the TK through 5th level from 7 hours a week to 9 hours a week. And another change within that 3.1 is that music and art both will now be offered to our elementary students every other week as a live synchronous lesson. On the week that they don't have the lesson live, they will be having an asynchronous lesson. And the reason that it cannot be weekly is because we have a narrow band of time in which we can deliver those lessons. And so we just don't have enough personnel to deliver a weekly lesson. But we're excited that music is going live. And then moving forward, we have a couple of other modifications that we are looking at beginning after the break, and we're calling this phase 3.2. And I think we mentioned in the past that there may be a whole bunch here in between the 3 and the 4. So this is the next one. And these are a couple of special circumstances in which a student will receive 4 days of in-person instruction per week. And the primary way that this will happen is that we are having school staff determine the students who really have greatest need, a demonstrated need to be in school 4 days a week. And those students will be joining both cohorts. So if they are currently a cohort A, they are now both in cohort A and in cohort B. And this is something that the state is really supporting. In fact, there's funding tied to it later in the year of looking at particularly our second language students, our students who for a number of reasons have a greater need than their peers. And so this is something where, as well, principals and teachers will be reaching out to families if they are invited to join in. And then the other change, and this is something that will only be happening within a few classrooms, is when we have cohorts where the in-person A cohort and the in-person B cohort added together, I got my math in here, are less than or equal to a half class size. So at the kindergarten through 3rd grade level, regular class size is 24 students, so a half class size would be 12. So you would have to have only a total of 12 then A plus B students or thereabouts. There could be a little bit of leeway in there. They'll be joining together and having in-person instruction 4 days a week. And we recognize that while many, many parents may wish that this would happen for their children, we aren't able to make this happen because of our class sizes and our in-person cohort A and cohort B sizes. It's not something that we can do right now for all students. And just as we needed to do when we started in-person instruction, we need to look at all of the different situations that we have on every campus and really differentiate to do what we can within the configurations that exist. And so that, of course, for those students who are in that situation would increase their in-person hours per week to 18 hours a week. And then we also wanted to state that phase 4, where all of our students in kindergarten through 5th grade have the opportunity for 4 or 5 days of in-person instruction a week, is a goal of ours. We're hoping that we'll be able to move forward this spring with that phase. And Marcy's going to be talking more about that on a later slide, so I'm going to hold on that one there.
Sorry, before you do move on to phase 5, just to also be sure that we also need to be sure that families know that in phase 3.2, for any students who are being invited in, that in accordance with the county guidelines, students can belong to no more than 3 cohorts. And so this would need to be considered 2. They would have their A cohort, their B cohort, so that would be 2. So school would become 2 of the cohorts that they can be involved in. So that's a consideration that families will need to make with that as well.
Thank you, Marcy. Super important. And then just stating once again that our goal is to be back in business in pre-COVID configurations, perhaps with still some, health and safety protocols in place for our 2021-22 school year. And that is our review of our phases. And then just a little bit of conversation here about how decisions are made. So we have different groups within our district that are all working on determining next steps for our school reopening. And that usually starts with our district administrative team. And this team is composed of our principals and our assistant principal at White Hill and all of our district office administrative staff. And we meet twice a week. And during our meetings, we actually divide them into 3 parts. One is on teaching and learning, and that's the piece where we're really thinking about next steps with our schedules and what hybrid instruction and moving into more in-person instruction might look like. And then we have operations that really talks about, well, what are all of the logistics that we would need to have in place in order to move forward? And then as a standing item, we always have a conversation about our equity work. And then this team, this district administrative team, meets at least once a month, roughly once a month, with our Delight team, which is composed of our teacher representatives, about 2 per site, our special education representative, and we also have union representation. And basically, if we have a new plan that we want to move forward, we bring it to our Delight team for feedback. And they are amazing in their ability to see nuance and things that we may not have thought about. And then as we continue moving through that very much iterative process, it's also brought to sites, and so that principals and Delight representatives can converse with their colleagues and gather more feedback. And again, this is, of course, that's how iterative processes go. This is something that continues kind of in a cycle. And all along the way, there is opportunity for parent input. The formal input from parents is in the form of Superintendent's Council. And that council has, along with our district administrators and some teacher representatives and some classified representatives, parent representatives from every site in our district, including our parent club president, our site council representatives. We have two members of our parent guardian equity task force that join us at Superintendent's Council, and also representation from our DLAC, who represents our English language learners. That's also, by the way, the group that works on our LCAP. And we met in September, and we are now planning for meetings for the remainder of the year and plan to meet monthly moving forward. We also receive on a regular basis, as do our site principals, communications from parents, which we always read and think about very carefully. We have been trying as a district office administrative staff to join parent club chats so that we can have site-based conversations. We lead DLAC, and thank you to Eric Sable, who leads that work once a month. And when the need arises, we do survey parents, and actually there will probably be a survey coming out in the coming weeks. I think I will stop there. Any questions on those last 2 slides?
No question here. This is Marie speaking. Let me start my video. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I just want to thank you for adding this planning team and process slide because I have been myself and some parents just wondering. It's just good to know that this is happening. I'm sure it was happening, but just knowing and naming it, it's very helpful. And so if I'm a parent and I want to know more about that phase 3.2, or I want to know more about the parent club meetings or all of that, do I contact the principal, or what's the best way for a parent if a parent is confused and or want to be more involved? What do you recommend being the first place they go? Is it like the principal? Because you see that a lot of things happening at the school site. Do you agree?
Yes, I think beginning with their site principal is always a good place to start, but we're all available. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for that.
All right. Thank you.
Alrighty, and before tonight, we've been spending a lot of time at our reopening updates talking about phase 3.1, so I won't spend a lot of time with that because Julia has covered a lot of it, and we have some slides coming up with our principals who will cover specifics related to phase 3.1. So as we are implementing phase 3.1 coming up on 2/22, we're still continuing to work on our phase 4, which as we've described would be an in-person with a modified day. And that would look like for 5 days a week with a shortened or modified day. What some of the elements that we've identified that we will have to do, need to do as we work more toward phase 4 is to be able to revisit our MOU. So MOU with our teachers and our classified unions. And some of the elements of those MOUs are our current distancing of 6 feet, as well as half class size. So those are some of the elements of the MOUs that we would need to look at, because as we're looking to get all of our students back onto campus, then we know that we would be unable to do that if we maintain 6 feet of distance. Our classroom spaces are not large enough for that. And then in order to have more kids in the classroom, we of course would need to not have half of the class sizes there. And we do need to, as Julia mentioned in the previous slide, survey families again. So as we're looking to expand into phase 3.1, the principals have told us that they've already been hearing from parents wanting to come out of Virtual Learning Academy and go into cohorts A or B, in-person learning. And as we know that we need to move forward into phase 4, is we definitely need to know from families what their commitment is to maintain or remain in Virtual Learning Academy for the rest of the year. As we know, back in October, when we were looking at beginning our in-person instruction, one of the elements that hampered our beginning to start as our originally planned time was staffing related. And with a large number of families who were interested in being cohort C, and as you will remember from previous presentations, is that we have approximately 29% of our students in cohort C. So as those students come back out, and as we're able to look at, as Julia mentioned in phase 3.2, combining any of the cohort sizes, or even asking students to come back, our most vulnerable students, then we definitely need to know who's remaining in cohort C. And we haven't asked for, up until what we're going to need to be doing in the coming weeks, is we haven't asked for a commitment for a period of time. Families have been able to move in and out of Virtual Learning Academy and in-person instruction as they wish. And the only caveat there is what that start date might be of coming into in-person. So they've worked with their school sites related to that. But as we move into phase 4, we really need to know who are, or what are our numbers related to being in person. And then we will be able to continue to analyze and work with what are our staffing needs. If we have any, maybe everything will work out perfectly. We have continued to advertise for teachers, and we do have advertisements out there for our classified openings. And HR is in the process of taking a look at where are we currently advertising, reaching out to, again, we do this on a kind of a cyclical basis, But again, at this time, reaching back out to other HR departments in other school districts to find out if they've had vacancies, where was their best luck in securing folks to come on board. I will say, at least as of today, we have finished our final classified hiring for Brookside School. So they do have all of their classified positions filled. The other schools definitely have some openings there. And so, as I mentioned, we have to do that analysis of class ratios of in-person to full distance learners. And that will be something critical to moving into phase 4, and which we really avoided this next bullet of adjusting classes as needed. One of the most important elements to our families early on, things may have changed or may not, and that will be an element of the survey, is in the event as we're moving more kids into in-person, we may have to adjust classes. So as any of our virtual learning teachers come back, and or as we're looking to expand, some students may need to change classes. So that will definitely be a consideration in our survey as we let families know in our moving forward. And then, as I already mentioned, secure the supervision, because as we're looking into having the students on campus all days of the week, then we will definitely need to be sure that we have supervision for them during the day, so that our employees, our teachers and other classified employees can take their required breaks during the school day. Any questions on that slide? Shelley?
One thing that I noticed that would be a consideration in the phase 4, and I think Marcy, you had already pointed this out under the first bullet point there about the 6.5 feet class size and space, is also the tension between the regulations with regard to contact tracing and what's considered a close contact versus the 4 foot. And I'm just bringing this up because it is another one of those tensions as we move into phase 4, because the known exposure definition for a close contact is 6 foot for accumulation of 15 minutes. So any cohorts or classes that are 4 feet are obviously going to be more than 15 minutes, which would have an impact on what gets reported as a known exposure. So I'm just noticing there seems to be a lot of those kinds of tensions in phase 4 to be resolved. So thank you for highlighting some of those and going forward. That's another one to maybe look at, is that connection between the contact tracing and known exposure with increasing class sizes or decreasing feet, the distance spacing. So just something to add to the list.
Thank you. Anything else for this slide here before we move on? Okay, all right. Well, Peg and Donna, take it away.
Good evening, everybody. Well, first we want to say that we are excited to be able to offer our children a longer day starting after this break. And this is the schedule that we developed in collaboration, the administration developed in collaboration with our Delight leadership team, our teacher leadership team. And a couple of highlights. One, before, our in-person students were receiving only 2 instructional blocks, and now they are getting 3 instructional blocks. Another highlight is that there'll be breaks, 2 breaks, and some schools might do 1 break, but there isn't going to be a formal lunch, and that's partly due to supervision and all of the protocols we have to have in place. Let's see. So a couple of things about flexibility that the teachers had versus what we had to have the same across the board. We certainly wanted all the students to have the same number of instructional minutes per grade. The teachers had to have the same number of minutes in terms of their prep time. The music, art, and PE is the same number of minutes. Same with the 5th grade music and so forth. But the teachers on the school site had some discretion around how to organize the schedule as long as those items were met. And so, for example, I think Donna could talk a little bit about what they're doing at Wade Thomas, at Manor. Our 3rd instructional block, because we have so few in-person students, we're going to keep that as just another instructional block, where other schools are going to use that time to focus just on their in-person while dedicating another block of time to their virtual learners. In the afternoon, the students will be having art, music, and PE, or the teachers will be working with those students who are virtual at home. And then teachers will also be having some prep time in the afternoon, along with meetings such as student study teams, IEP meetings, meetings with the principal, and so forth, grade level meetings. So it's a very full day, but we are excited to have more time with our students. Donna?
Thank you, Peg. You did a great job of explaining, as Peg said, that the individual sites, each of the 4 elementary schools, do have some flexibility. One thing we want to make sure of is that we provide sufficient support for our virtual learners, our students in cohort C or who may be at home on their day when they're not in person. So each site is, and by grade level, looking at times during this day, as Peg said at Manor, they're using the 3rd instructional block to focus on in-person learners and another time for virtual support. So that's one thing that will vary the site, as well as in some cases, grade to grade level, and class to class. For instance, if someone only has one virtual learner, it may affect how they're scheduling that time. As Peg said, art, music, and PE will be offered. Students will have, and we call it AMP, art, music, PE, period every day during the week. And our virtual students, the students at home, will have that during that 3rd instructional block. And then the students that came to school during the day would have that time in the afternoon at 1:45. And that would free the teacher up to provide some additional virtual support for those students that were at home that day. And as Julia said, we're really excited that our art and music teachers will be offering live lessons every other week, but there will be an art, music, and 2 PE lessons every week, either live or asynchronous. I think that's about it. Oh, kindergarten does get dismissed at 12:30. That is one change that isn't shown on this particular slide. I think that's about it.
All right, and any questions about the schedules for TK through 5th grade? No, all right.
Marvin here. I just wanted to mention that I'm glad to hear and I see the smile on the face of those dear principals here to see kids coming back to school a little bit longer. So thank you for working very hard to make that happen. Any more time that kids can spend on campus is going to be happy news for everybody in the community. Thank you.
We are very excited about that. Thank you.
All right, and then moving on to middle school. Matt, you're up.
Thank you for having me again. As we presented 2 weeks ago at the last board meeting about extending our schedule for 6th grade, we did present a schedule that was actually had some mistakes on it. So I'm really happy to have the opportunity to clarify. We had some eagle-eyed parents watching with some great questions and set us straight. So as we mentioned a couple weeks ago, we are expanding our 6th grade schedule by 1 hour. It is going to end for the in-person day at 12:40. That is 1 hour longer. We're adding 10 minutes to each of the core classes, and then we're adding a 30-minute advisory. And we're really looking forward to having the advisory for a variety of reasons. We have the community building. We can use that time as office hours. And we're going to be able to do some zero period and elective. The zero period and elective teachers are going to be able to use that time on occasion to check in with their students during the week, Tuesday through Friday, whereas usually they're only meeting with those students synchronously on Monday. So, and then in the afternoon, after the grab and go lunch, we are having the first period and zero period asynchronous time on Tuesdays and Thursdays. 21-6 class is still happening. That's our 7th period for 6th grade, 1:15 to 2:15 on Wednesday and Friday. So last week when we presented, we forgot to add in the 0 period. So we're happy that we fixed that and clarified that and shared the correct schedule with all the 6th grade families. One of the interesting things about the 6th grade schedule that I think is important to point out as we look at different ways to expand and extend our day. One of the things that keeps coming up is just, the students in 6th grade, how they don't have synchronous time or live teaching in-person time with their 0 period elective class or their elective or their enrichment wheel teacher during the week. And the reason for that is actually pretty simple. When we're running 2 concurrent schedules that are not the same, one for 6th grade, then another one for 7th and 8th, those enrichment wheel teachers are actually teaching our 7th and 8th graders during this time during the day. So in the afternoons, that is when they're typically teaching their 7th and 8th grade classes. So that's kind of why that works out that way. So the other piece of this that I think is interesting is with the 4 feet rule, as we start to look at what our numbers are at Whitehill, where we've really been around 25% of our students have opted for cohort C. And the trend right now is that number is shrinking. We're having fewer than 25%. More people are asking to come back on campus. So if you go from a half class size to 2/3 of a class size to 66%, it really does not allow for us to equitably increase the number of students in the classroom because we still can't fit an entire class in there, especially as fewer people are opting for cohort C. So we're not exactly sure how that's going to impact us. We're looking at all of our ideas and kind of throwing them all on the table to see which ones seem to make the most sense. One of the things that was mentioned earlier about phase 3.2, which was we've already begun having students that are on their day that they're not in person, they're joining us for a learning hub. And we've also had students that are in our SDC class, they're able to go to their general ed classes on occasion 4 days a week. So that's something we've already started and we're hoping to continue to do and maybe expand the number of students that are able to join our hubs when they're not in person. So that's the 6th grade schedule. And then this is the 3rd quarter, 7th and 8th. And you've already seen this and we're not making any shifts to this yet. But again, one of the considerations for this is how can we increase the number of students that are there 4 days a week, either with the Learning Hub, or how can we prioritize some students maybe in the future, who can show up 4 days a week where we're still under the half class size. The thing that's unique about 7th and 8th grade is, there may be, happen to be a math 8A class where there's 15 students in that class because of the number of students that happen to be in cohort C. But throughout the day, that may be 7th period, but in 4th period, that same student may put the number to 17 in that classroom. So that can't actually work. So we're looking at how we can increase the day there, but it's a little more complicated. And we're just gonna have to wait and see exactly how many families are opting to come back. Because like I said, the trend is that every day we're receiving notifications of families that are choosing to want to come back to our in-person model. So that is something we're thinking about and just trying to look at all of those options. We're not exactly sure what we're going to do yet.
Thank you, Matt. All right, any questions about middle school?
Quick clarification, Marcy, you had pointed out the A, when you combine an A and a B, that's considered 2 cohorts for that student, and each student is allowed to have 3 cohorts. Matt, could you clarify, with a 3x3 model in the 7th and 8th grade, does that mean that those students have 3 cohorts just by going to school, or how does that cohort work then for 7th and 8th grade?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it was in June now when the 30-point guidelines came out, the number 12 kind of spoke to the middle school and high school. And that was the middle school and high schools students could mix classes. They could go from class to class, and that would not be considered multiple cohorts. And so that is how we understand that. Marcy, do you have more clarification on that?
Yes, with the complication of middle school as opposed to elementary, and because the students do travel, they're departmentalized in those classes. The guidelines are different between elementary and middle. And I actually had a slide in here earlier and decided to take it out because it was beautifully explained in the latest CDPH guidelines that were issued on January 14th. But is where really what we have to be doing is tracking the students. So as meaning their movement around. And as Matt's talked about in previous presentations, their flow through the campus is directional. So that there's one way up the stairs or into a classroom and there's another way down or out as they're changing periods and the students have places where they stand. So the monitoring of the students and where they go on campus has been beautifully orchestrated by the White Hills staff related to that. And then one of the other things related to 7th and 8th grade is, and Matt, I don't remember the number, so you'll have to help me, is the number of students that the 7th and 8th grade teachers come into contact with over the course of the week versus the 6th grade. And then of course we know elementary with being in self-contained type classrooms. Matt, do you remember offhand the numbers?
Yeah, right now the max that a teacher could see is 90 students in 1 week.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure. All right, anything else about middle school? All right, Eric, take it away.
Okay, so another specific aspect to extending our school day pertains to our early intervention program, our 3 and 4-year-olds at Brookside, taught by Jeanette Molyneux. Our SDC classes at Brookside are the K1 taught by Miss Sarah Hom up there on the upper right, and Mr. Stephen McCrae, who has the 2nd through 4th graders this year, and he's down in the middle in the red jacket there, also at Brookside. And then over on the left is Miss Molyneux and Miss McLean, who's one of our OTs, doing work out on the playground with their kiddos. So this is going to look a little bit different than what our principal shared earlier about the elementary school extended day, because of the very specialized nature of these programs and the need to truly dedicate the maximum degree of time and resources to these students as we can. Let's see, so if we move forward, so extending the day for our SDC classes, the 2 of those classrooms at Brookside, along with the early childhood class of Miss Molyneux. And we have a little slogan. It goes live since October 5, because that's the day that we brought those students back to live instruction for Miss Hom and Mr. McCrae's classes 5 days a week. And Miss Molyneux has seen her kids twice a week because she has to keep those cohorts really small for safety reasons. So we're so proud of the 4 months of live in-person learning that we've been able to provide these children. And our teams have worked immensely hard to support them, to support those families, and also to envision how they can very thoughtfully, intelligently amplify the in-person learning schedule, as is our charge. So for the early childhood program of Miss Molyneux, her 3-year-olds are going to come 3 days a week instead of 2, and that's from 8 to 10 a.m. I think those are the 3-year-olds playing with the parachute, by the way. Very, very important detail there. And then the 4 and 5-year-olds, some of those kiddos turned 5 during this year. They're going to come 11 to 3, 2 days a week, which is longer than their current time slot. So what that adds up to are 2 additional hours of in-person instruction per week, which is significant. And of course, there's virtual support as well. And not only are those kids getting the instruction with Miss Molyneux in her classroom, but they're also getting access to speech services, to OT services as appropriate, physical therapy, and the magic of being on the beautiful Brookside campus. So for the SDC K-5 classrooms at Brookside, the kids get there about 8:15, but the day starts in earnest at 8:30, ends at 12:30, 5 days a week. And what we are proposing and what the team is working on is having dismissal at 2 p.m. Monday through Friday. So going a little bit later than the general education students. We feel really strongly that these 4 months of in-person learning, along with the virtual learning that comes in the afternoon, have been absolutely critical, but we need more time with our students. And why is that? Expanded opportunities for in-person speech and OT services. If the kids are only there for 4 hours a day, our specialists have less time to see them. And because of that, they can't see them with the frequency that would be optimal. So they're going to be able to do more one-to-one and group sessions because of the simple fact that the kids are going to be there longer during the school day. There's more time for the teachers and the program aides to help the children work on their individual IEP goals and the academic skills. They're building stamina for when normal school starts again. As we saw in an earlier slide, we've got all of our fingers crossed that we can get back to normal school in August. And so we want to make sure that our students, some of our most vulnerable learners, are really getting back in the flow of that. And then, of course, the Brookside Bear Community Building, that's so magical because we all know that one of the really profound impacts that the pandemic has had on our children is that it's been isolating, that social opportunities are restricted. And in fact, getting back to the specialists, a lot of that work they do is social in nature, whereby they'll be getting a group together for a speech session or for an OT session. And through the socialization, the kids are working on those life skills and those academic skills. So we're proud of all of our teachers and staff in RVSD, that what we've accomplished with the Brookside Early Intervention and SDC programs is really special. We were among the earliest in-person learning to happen in Marin County this school year. And actually going back to July 1st in the summer of 2020, when we ran an SDC extended school year or summer school classroom with Miss Hahn, I could probably safely argue that we were the first to go back to in-person learning, if not amongst the first in the county. And we did so successfully, we did so safely. And again, those continue to be our key driving principles, keeping kids and staff safe, through this lengthy process of getting everyone vaccinated. So just wanted to make sure to pause there if there were any questions about extended day.
Thanks, Marie.
No questions about the parachute even? Come on, that was...
All right.
I do love the fact that the kids are all bundled up in the classrooms with all the windows open. It's very cute.
They may prefer that to the summer heat.
All right, and our last slide this evening is talking about next school year. So here we are planning for our continued reopening this school year, and at the same time looking forward to 21-22. And we've got from a Calvin and Hobbes a little time capsule that they created. We'll be right back, and off we go. So we don't, as of this moment, know what guidelines might be in place for the 21-22 school year, but we are planning for a full return like our pre-COVID days, with all students on our campuses 5 full days a week at our regular school hours. And then for our families who may not be ready or able to return, if we do have a need for any virtual learning academy next year, that will be certainly something that we consider how to offer that to our students. And then whatever guidelines might be in place from the state or the county, we will certainly take those into consideration and incorporate them into our planning. So next year, we are hoping that we are back full, and probably what we're hearing right now, the minimum of the guidelines that'll be in place is we'll probably all still be wearing face coverings in the fall. All right, any questions? Oh, sorry, oh, there was that. Okay, great, we're back to Eric, so sorry.
Right, we got to get to the serious stuff here now, Marcy. So I just wanted to kind of give a quick update on a couple of things on the culture front. You know, so much of our work, really since last spring, through the summer, through the fall, winter, into the early part of this new year, has been to hammer out every last detail of how to get kids safely back to school, and then how to expand the school day. But throughout all that really hard work from staff, students, parent community partners, have been some really awesome, spirited, and fun times at school. It's not what we are used to in normal, typical times, but there's still so much love and positivity that really radiates throughout every campus. The Great Kindness Challenge was the week of January 25th through 29th, kind of a nationwide endeavor to really encourage schools to get kids in that mindset. And a couple images, the kindness rocks and the little kindness notes down below that were found at Brookside. It's a really sweet one from Owen there. If someone is feeling left out, include them or keep them company, which I think is really great. I think that's really great advice. And then the upper right, just walking around the Wade Thomas campus, all kinds of wonderful little corners of that campus. Just a little message to be kind. So that was something that our different campuses embraced a couple weeks back. And then last week, moving on to the next slide, we were really proud to, again, in challenging times, celebrate the 7th annual Global School Play Day, which is a movement started right here in Marin County, encouraging schools to dedicate one day of the school year, first Wednesday in February, to unstructured play. Research shows that unstructured play is on the decline. That's bad for kids. And common sense and good science tell us that children need unstructured play to learn, grow, build skills, build confidence, be happy. And newsflash, adults like it too. So there's a couple images. We had campuses that encouraged lots of activities at home, since of course the kids are at home for part of the week, and then also play-based activities, you know, with safety procedures in place. Both these images are from our Hidden Valley Hawk community. And breaking news, one of the first environments to hear this, but Global School Play Day is going to actually launch a September edition, in part to really celebrate the return to school. So we'll share more updates about that, and we look forward as a unified Ross Valley School District community to celebrate an in-person Global School Play Day in September.
Whoops. It's just the question slide, but I messed up. Quick review. Oh, It disappeared. Okay.
All righty. Well, related to our update number 14, any questions or anything that you have to say related to it?
Thank you again for keeping us updated, and we will look forward to number 15. So thank you all. I know that it's a lot of work doing it and appreciate the work that's put in communicating about it. So thank you.
Yeah, and please, for all of you that have participated in putting the presentation together, don't think that the lack of questions mean that there's not a lack of interest. It's just that it's a very comprehensive summary, and I appreciate all the hard work that's gone into it.
Thank you, Wesley.
All right. Now we can move on to the second presentation. This